After World War I, Americans began to feel wary of communist infiltration into the American government. They felt that communist beliefs conflicted with American standards and that a mix would lead to corruption in the government. To resolve this, in May 1938, the House of Representatives passed House Resolution 282 that created the House of Un-American Activities Committee, also known as HUAC. This committee was created to find communists or communist sympathizers within the government and other influential aspects of American life. In 1947, HUAC turned its attention to the motion picture industry. HUAC wanted to find any existing communist influence within Hollywood and make sure no communist propaganda gets to the American public in the future. In October of that year, the committee conducted 52 interviews over the course of 9 days on the infiltration of the communist parties into Hollywood. When 10 of the witnesses who were called to testify about their involvement with the Communist Party did not comply with HUAC, they were infamously branded as the Hollywood 10. The case of the Hollywood 10 became one of the biggest conflicts between one's morals and the government. When the Hollywood 10 did not compromise, the House Un-American Activities Committee overlooked their rights because of their beliefs.
Out of all the witnesses interviewed, most were called friendly witnesses. This is because they were compliant with HUAC's requests, two of which are Ron and Jack Warner. Ron was a very successful writer who escaped from Soviet Russia in 1926. She was asked by the committee to review the movie Song of Russia so that she could identify any communist propaganda embedded within the movie. When she was asked if the movie had either propaganda or a distorted account of conditions in Russia, she replied by saying that she believed that there was an attempt to cut out propaganda, but the filmmakers didn't understand that showing Russian citizens as a happy was propaganda in itself. Warner was a producer and the vice president of Warner Bros. The committee asked him about his company and the people working there. When he was asked about communism infiltrating the studios of Hollywood, he responded by reading his prepared statement. HUAC allowed him to read the statement even though there was no policy to permit witness statements.
The other category of witnesses were the unfriendly witnesses. These witnesses were not as compliant. Writers Dalton Trumbo and Ring Lardner Jr. both fell into this category. Dalton Trumbo was known for expressing his right to free speech. He had criticized HUAC since its creation. When Trumbo asked to read his prepared statement, he was denied, which is contrary to the opportunity given to Jack Warner, who was a friendly witness. The chairman said that he couldn't read his statement because it was too long, but it can be inferred that this was because Trumbo wouldn't compromise. Then, Trumbo was asked if he was a part of the Screenwriters Guild.
Mr. Stripling, the rights of American labor to inviolably secret membership lists have been won in this country by a great cost of blood and a great cost in terms of hunger.
Now, are you or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
I believe I have the right to be confronted with any evidence which supports this question. I should like to see what you have.
Oh, well, you would.
Yes.
Well, you will pretty soon. The witness is excused. Impossible.
During Lardner Jr.'s testimony, he was asked similar questions and, like Trumbo, defended his right not to be forced to answer questions regarding his membership to any organization. He was at first allowed to read his prepared statement, but later denied for refusing to answer questions. Both of these witnesses did not give HUAC the answers they preferred, and both of them were forced off the stand.
The rest of the unfriendly witnesses were Alva Bessie, Herbert Biberman, Lester Cole, Edward Dmytryk, John Howard Lawson, Albert Maltz, Samuel Ornitz, and Robert Adrian Scott. They are men who would later be known as the Hollywood 10. In 1949, HUAC continued the conflict by trying the 10 for contempt of Congress with the argument that they refused to answer their questions. This was a very quick trial that HUAC ended up winning. After an unsuccessful attempt to appeal their cases in 1950, the members of the Hollywood 10 served 1 year in prison and paid the $1,000 fine, which would equal about $10,000 today. Before they went to jail, they then made a short film to explain their side to the conflict and why they wouldn't compromise.
After the trials in October, producers signed the Waldorf Statement, declaring that their studios would not work with any of the Hollywood 10. More names of supposed communists kept on being added to the list until it was officially referred to as the Hollywood Blacklist. In order to be cleared from the blacklist, you have to 1. Answer for being communist, 2. Name names of other communists, and 3. Engage in some anti-communist act. Once the Hollywood 10 got out of jail, they still found ways to work in Hollywood while being on the blacklist. Most wrote screenplays under pseudonyms. Trumbo wrote his classic Roman Holiday while on the blacklist. Some of the 10 tried to argue in court that the blacklist was unconstitutional and a violation of the Sherman Act, an act that protected the right of every individual to choose his own calling in life and to follow the trade of his choice unhampered by any undue and unfair interference from others. Sadly, they failed. In the late 1950s, Kirk Douglas had had enough of the blacklist. He asked Trumbo to write and put his name on the movie Spartacus. This was the start of the undoing of the blacklist. Later, the blacklist was disbanded.
In 1965, the Yale Law Journal published an article concerning the blacklist. They concluded that based on past cases that the blacklist was in fact against the Sherman Act. They proved how HUAC and the Supreme Court truly stepped over the Hollywood 10's rights just because they did not compromise. This case is a perfect example of how not compromising can lead to conflict. This is also a point of history that we need to learn from. At first, the American public was on the side of the committee. Then later, they realized that everyone is entitled to their own opinion and no one deserves to be put in jail for their beliefs.